Wake up cities, start and take control over your future. It's been days, weeks and years, it's time to make it real. Stand up with me. We have so many goals to believe in. We'll try everything to achieve it. We have so many goals to believe in. We'll try everything to achieve it.
And welcome everybody to this international session of Family Economy Week, broadcast now in Italy, Australia, Japan, Finland, Greece, and Spain, with the patronage of the European Commission and under the high patronage of the European Parliament. You can find all details of the whole event on www.familyeconomyweek.eu. And welcome to this first international panel regarding the well-being economy, citizen well-being and economic growth. How much is the famous GDP able to measure the real economy well-being of a country, and how much instead represents an outdated indicator of economic growth as an end in itself? And it's not a question, I think, of abstract or immaterial concepts, but of foundations on which to build a new, more richer society, more equal, and from every point of view. And how to make it happen? This is a great question. And how to make it become part of the economic culture of developed countries. And talking about the future, remember this date, please, 2099, because we will talk about it later in the event with an extraordinary and intense piece of music created specifically for the Family Economy Week event. So let's go together in this conference. And this is the first conference, as I said, of the Family Economy Week. And we are really pleased to host the institutional opening greeting by Fabio Massimo Castaldo, as the Vice President of the European Parliament. And please open the link and welcome to the Family Economy Week.
Buongiorno a tutti.
On the occasion of the Family Economy Week that Professione Finanza and International Institute for Cultural Economic Education have decided to dedicate to a fundamental topic as that of financial education, is really a pleasure to bring my greetings and also express my best wishes for good work during these days. They'll be certainly intense, but I'm sure that the invited panelists will bring a significant contribution into the importance of spreading financial culture, especially among the younger generations. This is also demonstrated by a recent article by economist Anna Maria Lusardi together with Pierre Carl Michaud and Olivia Mitchell. This article shows how 30 to 40% inequality in terms of wealth accumulated during a lifetime can be explained by differences in financial knowledge, which then allow them to benefit from much more sophisticated tools to achieve. This is a relevant point for Italy, since a survey by Standard & Poor's shows that almost 2 Italians out of 3 are unable to correctly answer elementary questions on economic and financial matters, which is unfortunately the worst result among advanced countries, where we are clearly at the bottom of the rank. Greater financial literacy is therefore a cornerstone not only of a society's growth but also, and above all, a harbinger of a series of positive repercussions, ranging from health to social inclusion and environmental protection. I am therefore referring to the construction of a well-being economy nowadays written in the actions that we are carrying out at European level, to focus attention on the pillar of social rights. The emergency situation that we are experiencing offers us a unique and unrepeatable opportunity to question and rethink the entire system of economic governance of the European Union, which puts debt reduction and budget balancing too much before social and economic objectives such as the creation of fairly remunerated jobs, the reduction of inequalities, including gender inequalities, and the implementation of projects in green infrastructure so essential to finally implement the Green Deal. Knowledge and power, said an aphorism attributed to the English philosopher Francis Bacon, that in today's context could be translated as information as wealth. I hope and indeed I am totally certain that these days will be the right place to take an important step forward with a debate then full of insights and proposals useful for the construction of a reflection of economic policy that focuses on the role of social balance between different social classes, gender, and geographical origins. So, with the full vision of financial education and great perspective, I personally will be happy to give my small contribution, and in the meantime I greet you and wish all the organizers and all the participants of the Family Economy Week an excellent and constructive continuation of the work, with the hope of being able to see us physically very soon to give you also then a further insight into the sensitivity that every day I humbly try to express in my commitment to the European Parliament. Good work, good continuation, and good financial education to all.
Thanks for your introduction, Mr. Castaldo. Now we are really ready to start this 2021 edition of the Family Economy Week. And I want to introduce my special guest of today. And welcome to Katherine Trebeck, Advocacy and Influencing Lead, Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Welcome, Katherine.
Hello, great to be here.
Welcome. And welcome to Lorenzo Fioramonti, Deputy of the Italian Republic, economist and academic.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, Lorenzo. And we will have also connected Phyllis Borzi, consultant and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Labor for the Employee Benefits Security Administration of the Obama administration. So we are ready to start the panel, and I want to start with Lorenzo Fioramonti. Lorenzo, what is the well-being economy and why is essential in the creation of what we call the new world?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. It's a pleasure to be part of the Family Economy. I think it's a very important event, and we should have more and more of these events to touch on such important issues. The well-being economy is an economy that puts well-being at the center of everything that we do. In a sense, it's an approach that moves the focus away from the concept of economic growth as we have intended it so far, and asks the fundamental question of what is an economy for? Why do I say this? Because we've seen that over 100 years of growth on production and consumption have generated a number of side effects, a number of consequences and negative impacts on society, on the environment, that risk being even more severe and more acute than the benefits we got from economic growth. And so now we're saying, can we do better? Can we do better than what we've done over the past century? Can we have a system of production and consumption that has a positive impact on our psychological level, that has a positive impact on society, that has a positive impact on the environment? Can we continue having a model of economic growth where the dial ticks every time that we destroy something? Is it possible that we still, in the 21st century, have an indicator like the gross domestic product that goes up when people get sick, when people use more medicines, when there is a catastrophic event, when people get stuck in traffic, when we sell arms to each other to wage wars? So the well-being economy says something very simple. Rather than focusing on the quantity of consumption and production, we should focus on the quality. We need to reward the companies that are producing better stuff, more healthy stuff, better food, better energy, and are doing so with a very limited impact, negative impact on the environment, but a lot of positive impacts on our society, on how we feel, and so on and so forth. And I think this is a revolution that can happen now. We have all the tools, the technical tools to make it happen. It's just a matter of political will.
So important words, Lorenzo, and we are so happy to spread this kind of issues, and especially through culture, through education. And we are really happy. And Katherine, we are interested in making an international contribution to this issue, not only in Italy, to spread this culture, as I mentioned, especially in the interest of a final citizen. They have to be more aware on his or her personal and final choices on the issue of saving, investments, protection, and social security. Tell us, please, what the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is. What is your vision, mission, and why do you think the time has come for the well-being economy to become more and more a reality?
Thank you, Marco. So the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is a global collaboration of organizations and individuals who work across different sectors. There's academics, there's politicians, there's activists, there's businesses, there's think tanks, and they're all united by this common sense that we need to collaborate to achieve the sort of economic system change that Lorenzo talked about. I talk about it as having many mothers, in the sense that there are a whole lot of different organizations who in 2017 and 18 recognized that for decades they have been building the evidence base. They have been developing in microcosm the sort of changes we need to see to build an economy that's in service of our collective well-being. But despite all that work that had been happening for decades, building the case and showing what it looks like, it wasn't yet adding up to the sort of system change that we needed. And so our many mothers behind the Wellbeing Economy Alliance really recognised that the time had come for collaboration. And so WEAL was really set up to facilitate that collaboration, to bring together all those different actors who each of them bring together a piece of that jigsaw about the wellbeing economy. So we've got experts in circular economy, we've got experts in community wealth building, we've got experts in donut economics, we've got experts in economic democracy, we've got experts in cooperatives, and so on and so on, all sorts of different people who each of them bring ideas, bring experience, and most importantly, bring passion to that shared endeavour of transforming our economic system. And why I think the time has come is because I think there's just so much evidence, and people across the world are really recognising this now, that the old recipes, the recipes of the 20th century, are no longer fit for purpose in an era where we've gone beyond any benefits that could be obtained from economic growth in a macro sense. It's time to create new recipes that fit the world of planetary boundaries, where we're recognising and paying attention to inequalities, and we're really saying we need the economy to be in service of our collective well-being rather than the other way around. And I think people are really up for that conversation. I think the pandemic has put some energy into that conversation, but I think also we now have enough evidence of what it looks like, what it takes, and I think people are really ready to embark on the journey of getting on and building that sort of economic system.
To have you here and we can touch and feel your passion is really important about this kind of topics. Now, Phyllis Borzi, for years now there has been talk of social equity in the agendas of many countries, of many organizations, but concrete acts do not always follow, we know. And when you work at EBSA as the head of the agency, your choices impacted approximately on 150 million Americans. Do you think that with the pandemic something can change in the awareness of having to do more to make the world more equitable?
So in some ways, the United States has been slower to recognize the importance of more global or holistic views of economic well-being. You know, in the United States, we don't have the kind of universal baseline social security, social safety net that many of the other countries in the world have. We have a system, an economic security system that consists of a couple of public programs like our Social Security program, which is nearly universal, but not entirely universal. But the heart of our economic retirement savings program is a voluntary system based on employment. And because our system has been employment-based or employer-based, in general, the United States has focused on economic well-being in a much more narrow fashion than those of you across the globe have. We've focused on workplace pension and savings plans and individual savings like an individual retirement account. But in the past 15 or so years, there has been a greater awareness that to create the kind of financial well-being and economic security that will really sustain the country and our families, we have to look at this question of economic well-being in a much broader fashion than we have in the past, because we have to assure that this consideration of economic well-being goes far beyond an individual's pension plan or retirement savings program. And in particular in the United States, we've focused over the past 20 years, I would say at least, on the need to make sure that medical costs, particularly in retirement, can be covered and need to have attention paid to them. Again, many of the other countries in the world have social safety net medical systems. We do in the United States. We have a Medicare program for seniors, for individuals over 65, and for disabled people. And we have a Medicaid program, another public government program for the poor. But the middle class basically relies on individual health plans that are sponsored by employers. And of course, in the past 10 plus years, they've had to rely on, or they've been able to rely on, the benefits of what we in the United States euphemistically call Obamacare, which is a program designed to fill in the gaps for people who don't have health coverage through the public programs or through their employers. So we've been looking more at broadening retirement financial security, economic security, to include things like healthcare, disability, et cetera. And of course, technology has opened up new opportunities and provided new challenges as well. But to go directly to this question about what has been the result of COVID, I think what COVID has shown us is that we can't just focus on our own family, our own community, our own country. No one can go it alone. We need to think more broadly and in a global fashion. We need to be more cooperative, work more cooperatively with our global neighbors. And it certainly has exposed, the COVID pandemic has certainly exposed something that we always knew was a problem in the United States, and I assume it's a problem across the world. At least that's what my global friends have told me. And that's the economic insecurity that's caused in part by a tremendous wage gap or economic inequality across the country. And I think COVID has forced us in the United States and hopefully throughout the world to begin to focus on how we can lift up all individuals and families to provide economic security and not just focus so narrowly.
Thanks for your answer, Phil. And the great lesson is that we need to be more global. And thinking about globally, we move from United States to Europe. Lorenzo, how far is Europe going towards the well-being economy? Is there more to be done in that direction? And if so, what?
Well, I think what Phyllis Borzi just said is very instructive, right? She just told us that basically the superpower, the richest country in the world is struggling to guarantee Social Security, healthcare, that people in the United States many of them do not have the same rights and the same benefits that they have around the world, right? So we're connecting this to the previous session, right? So how is it possible we have created an economy that the American system is perfectly representing, that is not able to deliver on the quality of life? You would expect Americans to live better than others, and they do not. we in Europe are more privileged than our American counterparts. So we're economically, in terms of GDP, more underdeveloped than America, but actually we live better. We have a better life. We have more social security. We live longer, and the Americans look at us to understand how to do it. I think in Europe, certainly, we are better off compared to our North Atlantic counterparts, but we're not there yet. A well-being economy is not just an economy that takes care of those in need or tries to take care of those in need, but it also empowers everyone to live better. So there is a fundamental step that has to be taken in terms of how we design our policies. We want to have a tax system, a fiscal system that is incentivizing good production, is incentivizing good companies. Doing the right thing shouldn't just be a voluntary act, shouldn't just be the act of an entrepreneur that tries to do the right thing. It needs to be incentivized by the policy. The policy is there to make sure that those who do well, those that have a positive impact on society, have a positive impact on their workers, have a positive impact on the environment, are also getting benefits from the tax system. And those that do not get sanctions. So in Europe, for instance, we're not there yet. And I think a lot has to be done in order to make sure that the well-being economy is not just making everyone live a little bit better, but it's about a quantum leap away from the current economic system, which in Europe, like in the US, like anywhere else in the world, is not sustainable socially and environmentally, to one that is perfectly sustainable. And it's creating positive benefits for everyone without generating the negative outcomes.
And at the end is a political choice, of course. And Katherine, recalling that Italy is the first country that since 2018 has included a set of indicators of fair and sustainable well-being, we call it BES, among the programming and the evaluation tools of the national economic policy. The BES aimed to evaluate the progress of society not only from an economic point of view, but also under the social and environmental aspect. What are the 5 we all need, and which ones do you think the pandemic has highlighted the most?
So let me just say a couple of words about how we derived these needs. So we recognize that all the diversity of our members really had at its common essence a shared view of what the economy needed to deliver. So we surveyed our very diverse members and said, what is it really that we want the economy to be in service of? And we distilled that down into what we describe as the 5 we all needs. And these are things like dignity, fairness, connection, participation, and nature. And these are the sort of things that we need our economy to be in service of. These are really universal values. This is what makes us innately human. Around the world, wherever you are, you'll see that people really prioritize having a sense of dignity, having a sense of purpose in their work, in their life, having enough to be part of society, and also valuing the local and global environment as well. And in a way, I think, Marco, that what the pandemic has showed is not that one is more important than the other, that in fact they're actually all important in equal measure, and they're deeply, deeply interconnected. Because what has the pandemic showed us? That what sort of workers is it that have most mattered to society? It's been cleaners, it's been health workers, it's been delivery drivers. And so often the economy of the previous times, of pre-COVID times, has been standing on the shoulders of fairly underpaid, undervalued workers who, it turns out, are doing some of the most important life-saving, life-giving work in society. And so how do we build an economy that properly values and rewards and nurtures and supports that sort of work? We also see that what is it that people were craving when they were in the midst of lockdown? It wasn't going out shopping. It was being together. People were missing being alongside each other. They were missing being able to put their arms around each other. They were missing being able to hang out with each other. That sense of connection and participating with each other is what people really missed. And of course, what is it that people found really got them through the day during the pandemic? That was finding a tiny pocket of nature, spending their 1 hour where they could go outside exercising, spending it in a park, soaking up the natural environment. And because we saw that deep interconnection between the environment and human health. And so I think what COVID really revealed is that interconnection between all those needs, that the planet matters just as much as human dignity, and the economy needs to be constructed in a way to nurture and enhance and enable all of those to flourish.
Thanks, Katherine, for your answer. We are discovering again that we are living just one planet, and we have only one planet. And also, Phyllis said before this kind of sentence. I think it is an important message that we are now broadcasting to our supporters in this kind of panel. And I come back to Phyllis because in developed economies, the extension of life will reach record levels in the coming years, and this will have to be reconciled with a probably lower support of contribution to support retirement by young people, and reflecting on a social economy model that goes beyond the traditional indicators of wealth, inserting others. How can we be sustainable, taking into account the needs of different generations?
As countries throughout the world, particularly in the developed world and certainly in the United States, as we experience a greater, an increase in longevity, obviously the need for a more adequate set of retirement supports or economic supports for individuals and families is necessary. You know, the question about generational wealth transfer is really an important one. In the United States, like all over the world, we are experiencing the kind of demographic change that exacerbates this generational wealth transfer. We have fewer younger workers to support retirees. Our Social Security system, which is the social safety net for individuals, as I said before, it covers it's almost universal, not quite. I think it covers something like 94% of the population. Our Social Security system was never designed to provide the entire panoply of retirement and economic security supports. So people in the United States are required to also rely on employment-based pensions and individual savings. But the demographic changes, particularly the increase in longevity and the decrease in fertility, have hit our Social Security, our public program, pretty significantly, as well as our employer-based programs. And in each of those cases, the policymakers and decision makers, whether they be in the private or public sector, really have begun to and really need to spend more time focusing on the intergenerational transfers that these programs have long adopted. Interestingly, younger savers are more interested in these broader social economic issues than the older generations are. In terms of investments, we need to be, in the United States, we need to have a much greater focus on long-term investments. And people are beginning to talk more openly and aggressively about the kind of long-term investments that need to focus on climate change and things that we can do to preserve our world, on investments that address economic inequality and reward companies that are moving towards shortening and closing the wage gap. Our investment policy needs to be moving it is moving in the direction, but rather slowly, of eliminating racial, ethnic gaps in communities and society, focusing more on housing and employment, investments that will generate additional opportunities in those areas. And as somebody who's worked both in the pension area and in the last 2.5, 3 decades has focused a lot on healthcare, one of our big problems is in the United States is trying to eliminate the racial and ethnic gaps in the provision of healthcare. So I guess my bottom line here is, in the United States, as all over the world, it's good and should be encouraged for us to focus more on the quality of life issues that that create economic security for families. And as I said, we're moving towards that in the United States, but probably a bit slower than in some of the countries in the rest of the world.
And this is so important, Phyllis. This is important to hear that young people are more interested in social economic issue in compare with older generation. And this is, I think, a great point for the future. And let me go in the last round table turn. And Lorenzo, social cohesion is one of the main pillars of well-being economy. Which is the state of art now in Italy, and how far we are from an ideal optimum?
I think in Italy we are privileged. We're privileged because of our culture, because we're a country that traditionally has always valued the quality of social relations. Italy has been designed as the country of the commons, right? You know, we call our cities the commons. It's not by chance, right? It's what we share. The sharing the public life, the sharing the property. You know, we have gone through centuries through different stages of innovations when it came to managing public property and managing the public space and so on and so forth. And many other countries historically have learned from Italian cities how to do so. It's been a country of participation, but we have to recognize that over the past 30 years, we have lost a lot of the advantage we had. We have pursued economic policies that were not fit for us. You know, in many cases, we have destroyed small and medium micro enterprises to the advantage of huge conglomerates. You know, we bought into this idea that big is beautiful. Mostly looking at the United States. I mean, we have to admit that we looked at the United States as an example. We thought, oh, well, those companies are so successful. They're so big. Our companies are so small. No, we want to have big companies, without considering that big companies are very far from their users, right? They're very far from the impacts of their actions, while small companies are locally based, often locally owned, often family owned. So they're much more in touch with the needs of the population, of the needs of their territories, of their localities, and so on and so forth. We have done the same when it came to healthcare. I mean, Phyllis was previously talking about the deficiencies of the healthcare system in the United States. In Italy, we had a very sound and strong territorially based system of healthcare, distributed. We had doctors everywhere. We had doctors knocking on the door, checking how people were doing almost every month. We decided that was underdeveloped, that it was bad. And now we need to have big hospitals and flashy hospitals and reduce the investment in territorial health care in order to privilege big compounds, big conglomerates, even when it came to healthcare. And then we realized with COVID that we were wrong, that we should have had doctors everywhere. We should have prevented people from getting sick rather than focusing on treatment. Treatment should be a last resort. A functioning healthcare system should be the one that doesn't get you sick in the first place. You know, we should focus on eating well. We should focus on doing sports, on having free time to dedicate it ourselves. On the contrary, even in Italy, we bought into this idea that a successful society is a frantic society. It's a society where everyone is always busy. We're always stuck in a traffic jam, or we're going to the office and spend longer hours at work than we can spend in our communities and our families. We were wrong again. We should have done what our forefathers used to do, right? Spending more time in the community, spending more time being involved in building the economic democracy that Katherine was referring to. We did the same again with schools. We destroyed small schools. We put schools together, created big schools, city schools. We forced children to go away from the village and come to the city to learn. Another big mistake: more pollution, more mobility, more costs to families, more time spent moving from one place to another. And also, big schools are hard to manage. You learn better in small schools, but now we have fewer and fewer small schools in our country. Again, so Marco, to come to my conclusion, we were an example in many cases of a different way of doing things. Small farmers were very common in Italy. Now we have shifted more and more towards industrial farming. Industrial farming is more polluting. It creates more inequalities. It rewards the big entrepreneurs, the people with a lot of money, doesn't reward the peasants, doesn't reward those that actually are working on the land. We used to have small micro enterprises. We were probably one of the most important economies around the world in terms of the fabric of small localized production. We decided also intentionally that was backward. We needed to move towards the American model. We were wrong again. Now many countries are trying to incentivize local production, incentivize the creation of SMEs, and so on and so forth. We should invest more in that regard as well when it comes to healthcare, education, and so on and so forth. I think in many ways, Italy is still an example. It's still an example. And what you mentioned earlier, the fact that we decided to use well-being indicators in our economic planning, thanks to our action, I'd like to emphasize it didn't come from somewhere else. It came from the people that are in this conversation, from myself and my colleagues. The fact that it was decided that we need to embrace a different stance in some economic policies, and in more and more being proud of what we are without looking at others to look for lessons to be learned. But we shouldn't be complacent, okay? We are still far away from the optimum. The optimum is an economy that is light on nature and it's creative and constructive for society. We're not there yet. We still have too many inequalities. Italy is more unequal today than it was 20 years ago. Italy is much more vertical today than it was 50 years ago. The son of a worker had more chances to become a lawyer or a politician in the 1950s than it has nowadays. And this is an economic failure. This is not a land of opportunity. It's actually a much more vertical system of structural inequality, more similar to the United States. We should avoid making the mistakes they made in America and try to recover some of our traditions and use them to project ourselves much more confidently into the 21st century with this idea of well-being at the center of economic planning.
Thanks for your contribution, because this is, I think, an important contribution and reflection to how we can and how we have to manage the future, and especially regarding the young generation, because we are here for them. And regarding this, I want to introduce a contribution of Adriano Coppa as a junior board member for events at European Youth Parliament. And I asked him if GDP is still an effective measure for his generation and how he sees the role of his generation in society. Please open the link.
Family Economy Week.
In the last decades, societies have profoundly changed their perspective towards economy. The relation between economic and personal wellness is no more strictly linked to money and economics, but it has opened in order to cover wider perspectives. As stated by the United Nations in its Sustainable Development Goals, economy has to take into consideration the pivotal measure of sustainability, declining its various forms such as social equity, responsible consumption and production, or gender equality. Young generations, my generation, has made clear that the general mindset has to change from a here and now perspective to a there and then perspective. We have shouted loud that we want the same possibilities, that it's not acceptable, then the quality of your life, its duration, its development, still depends on where you come from, your gender, or your economical capabilities. we cannot stick to the GDP, inflation, and other purely economic data in order to set up national policies. We have to remember that those data have an effect on people and on their actions, as well on our environment. And the past years, unfortunately, have showed us how fragile we are. But at the same time, I believe we have rediscovered strength we didn't think we had. And now, with the aid offered by international institutions, I think to the European Union and its recovery fund, which for no reason it's called Next Generation EU Fund, we have a great possibility to create a path that could provide fair and equitable development in economic wellness. And we shall not waste such a potential. Italy itself has enormous potentials, and many of them are tragically being lost. Just an example, in the last 8 years, we have seen an increase of 42% in Italian graduate students leaving our country in search of opportunities abroad. Myself, I am studying abroad right now, so I am just an example of it. But some measures are still possible. We should invest in education, in supporting youngsters entering the labor world with dignity, not attacking jobs that are legalized exploitations. As per myself, I am a very positive person. I believe that the younger generations will be able to effectively communicate and share their views with institutions and policymakers. As our common goal is to create a safe and valuable future for everyone. But one point should not be forgotten, which is that we relearn in the last period that alone we are weaker, and only together as a community, international community, national community, local community, we can face the problematics that we are going to encounter in our future.
Thanks, Adriano, for your contribution. And it's nice to have such a clear testimony about the future. And again, we are and we have just one planet for every of us. So I want to pass to Katherine for your last question. The young people of Friday for Future have triggered a proposition of themes related to the environment. How much sensitivity is there on the part of the new generations on the more social aspects? And thinking about the ESG acronym, now a must in finance, as you know, how much awareness do you see about the S of social? And finally, what advice would you give them?
So let me take the first part of your question first there, Marco, around Fridays for the Future and the sense to which they're sensitive to some of the social dimensions and social needs. And I think they are acutely aware. And I think what they're bringing to the table is a deep and almost innate understanding of the intersectionality between some of these questions. They're recognizing the fact that we cannot survive as a species, let alone flourish as societies, if our planetary home isn't healthy. They're recognizing those vertical inequalities in terms of economics, in income inequality, wealth inequalities, but they're also very loudly, very powerfully putting on the table some of the horizontal inequalities, questions around race, gender justice, inequalities related to disability. And you've seen this last year. Not only did we have Fridays for the Future in the last few years, but we've also, of course, had the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement as well, really bringing to the fore questions on how we treat different groups in society based on their skin color, on their gender, on their sexual orientation, those sorts of questions. And what I think the younger generation are quite brilliant at doing is just innately understanding the links between them, not allowing the conversation to separate these off into remote silos as if they were isolated. What they do, I think, really powerfully is recognize actually these are all part of an interconnected system. They're cumulative oppressions as well. You cannot see these in isolations. And on a more positive sense, that our solutions have to look for multiple benefits rather than dividing these up and just be isolated when we're looking to solve some of the problems. In terms of the ESG agenda, I think it is probably fair to say that the E in ESG has probably got a lot of attention in the last few years, but I think that's in a way a little bit misguided because we know deeply that the environmental question is at its heart a social justice question. We see that in the story of who is putting most pressure on the planet, and of course who it is who's most impacted by environmental breakdown. There are profound inequalities in terms of who is using most resources and who bears the brunt of our environmental breakdown. And they are literally two sides of the same coin. And I use that word coin deliberately because it is our economy, our economic systems, as we've been discussing today, that it underpins that connection. And so if we're going to tackle the environmental crisis, if we're going to attend to social injustices, we need to look at our economic system. And in terms of advice to anyone who wants to be part of this conversation, well, partly it is to keep this discussion going. Allow yourself to ask bigger questions about the economy. Allow yourself to encourage your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues to ask hitherto heretical questions about what is the purpose of the economy? Has growth actually done its job? And now we need to think about distribution and cherishing the resources that we've got. Link up with other people who are asking similar questions. Join the book group. Wellbeing Economy Alliance has a book group called We All Read. Learn and encourage yourself to also take faith in the examples of people already building examples of a wellbeing economy in their streets, in their cities, in their parliaments, in their businesses, because we know what change looks like. We see it every day. There is certainly no shortage of examples of what a wellbeing economy looks like. The task now is to amplify them and to be encouraged and excited by the example that they set and translate the example that they show us to the sort of economic systems change that we need at a wider level. And so my advice is just keep the conversation going. Dare to ask those questions that in the past have been forbidden. Ask, isn't it time that the economy serves us rather than the other way around?
Thanks. And I think this kind of panel in the Family Economy Week is absolutely able to get people more aware about well-being economy. And thanks really for your contribution and Lorenzo's one to explain us better what well-being economy is. And I think that there are also other actors that can contribute to get final investors more aware about this kind of topics. And I wanna ask to Phyllis, Borzi, in a logic of greater economic and financial well-being, the role of financial advisors and financial education play a potentially fundamental role. What is your point of view on this? And if you have any practical advice for savers and investors? Thanks, Phyllis.
So this question about the role of financial advisors in financial education is a really important one. Again, this is an area in which many of our colleagues in Europe and throughout the world have begun to address in a bit more rapid fashion and in some cases in a more aggressive fashion than we've been able to deal with in the United States. You know, the concentration of economic and political power is always a big obstacle to change. In the United States, as across the world, there has been a movement away from traditional defined benefit plans, traditional pension plans, into a greater reliance on personal savings vehicles. In the United States, as I said before, they're employment-based, and they're the biggest group of these employment-based individual savings, personal savings vehicles is the 401k plan. 401k, by the way, is just a section of our Internal Revenue Code. It's very interesting to me because for all the years I've been in the employee benefits area and in public policy generally, I think 401k is the only section of our millions of pages of Internal Revenue Code financing tax law that ordinary Americans can identify. Of course, they don't know what 401k is. They don't necessarily know that it's a section of the code. But also there's been a greater movement towards individual retirement accounts, which are not employment-based. An individual can just go to a financial institution and open one of these savings accounts. And I know that many of our European colleagues have adopted such programs as well. As I said before, this movement away from traditional pension plans where employers bore the risk and investment risk, longevity risk, and people got pensions at the end of the road when they were ready to retire based on a formula that's a combination of age and salary and length of service, etc. This movement away from these traditional pension plans has really forced individuals to become fully responsible for their own financial well-being. The Social Security, as I said before, the basic Social Security benefit was never intended to be adequate to cover people's economic needs in retirement. So this whole question of how to assure a better and more secure, economically secure retirement is a vexing one, particularly since most individuals, I don't know whether you're all like me, but this is supposed to be my business. I've been in this business. I've worked in this area for more than 4 decades. And yet I feel like I don't know enough about the financial investment side to be able to make completely reasonable and adequate decisions for my own retirement. So I need to find somebody, as most people do, to help them get through these challenging opportunities. So financial education, financial advisors, very, very important. But we've also seen a shift, which I think is a really good thing, from those financial advisors focusing solely on the particular set of investments that they may have access to in helping individuals, to making sure they fully understand all the retirement, all the economic supports, all the assets that people have, a more broad and holistic view of financial well-being, in order to give them the kind of advice that they need as to how to be able to manage all of these assets and to fill in the gaps while they're still young enough, if they can, to make sure that they have an adequate economic base for their retirement. In the United States, as I said, we're a bit behind some of the other countries, UK, Australia, etc., because financial conflicts of interest among these advisors have had the result of reducing people's investment returns. And these are people, individuals who have so-called done the right thing. They've saved for their retirement, they've put money aside, they're very conscientious, but they need help and they reach out to people. And the problem is they don't always know who to trust. In the United States, there's been a much greater emphasis over the past 2 decades on the need for financial education and financial advice. At the same time, the regulatory system to make sure that people get advice they can trust, because the advisors are not making recommendations that give them a better financial return than their clients. And this has been very difficult. The regulatory climate has been very difficult. We move forward slightly, but for every step forward, we move backwards. And again, it's because the concentration of political and economic power does not rest in individuals. It rests in financial, in this case, the financial institutions. And they're very loath to give up that power, not surprisingly. What we're trying to do is help them move away from a financial model that's based on conflicts of interest or encourages conflicts of interest by steering clients to particular products or investment strategies into a climate that is fiduciary in nature, where people's duty of loyalty under the legal system is to their clients, not to the financial institutions that they work for, the insurance company, etc. My advice to people, I talk to a lot of consumer groups, and generally what I say is, ask people, how are you paid? I normally would say, ask them, are you a fiduciary? But that term doesn't necessarily mean anything to most ordinary citizens. I think we've gone a long way in my work in the Obama administration to get people more educated to the need for a fiduciary to be providing advice. The fiduciary is under that legal standard to have a duty of loyalty to the client, not to anybody else. So I always say to people, follow the money. Ask who's paying you. So, if I'm writing a check to you because you're giving me financial advice, by and large, that means that our financial interests are aligned. Because when I do better, you do better, you being the advisor. But if they're being paid by a third party, and they're really just in the distribution chain for insurance or for mutual funds or for other types of financial products, that's when your antenna go up. So I think all of these things are important. I think it's really important for individuals as well as society to have the opportunity to select investments that reflect their values, broader than just what generates the highest return, but investments that provide the ability to take into consideration economic, social, governance factors, the classic ESG factors. It's very hard in the United States because of our legal structure you can't take your eye off the ball. You in the United States, our legal structure says that you can only take into consideration ESG factors when the traditional financial risk return characteristics are similar or the same. Then you can look at this. Then you could look at these other factors. But the world is evolving. The benchmarks for measuring ESG factors and their economic impact are evolving. And so I do think that there's going to be more and more focus in terms of financial education and advice on these types of investments. Because after all, we're all in this global economy, and we need to think about the impact of our investments, not just on ourselves, but on the world in general.
Thank you. Thank you also for your answers and for your contribution. And we know financial education is really, really important for well-being, economy, education of people. And thank you to you, Mrs. Borzi. Thank you to Ms. Trebeck, and thanks to Mr. Lorenzo Fioramonti. It has been an intense and very rich panel of contents that I'm sure it will contribute to increasing knowledge and awareness on the well-being economy in the society. So really thanks to being here in the first panel, international panel of Family Economy Week. And now coming back to 29.9, the idea was born to sensitize as many people as possible to the responsibility of our actions in taking care of ourselves and the planet too, through the language that unites us all, music. And we did it with the youngest Italian music talent called Virginia De Lutti, an extraordinary author, composer, and also singer. 2099 is a generational embrace and a profound message for all of us, a kind of hymn to reflection, to responsibility, and what we must do today without ifs and buts, and we also in this panel we talked a lot about that we have the fact that we have no choice because we need a more equitable, more sustainable, and more inclusive world. So spread your arms, turn up the volume, and we are in 2099.
Another day in 2099. Frenetic rhythms, ordinary lives. We have forgotten why we leave. What if mankind got it all wrong? Fairy tales speak of peace and sunlight, atmospheres color gold. Free love, was it found, was it treasured? Did they fight for what's gone? Did they fight to save life and mine? We started war against our own home years ago, and we don't know. I'll learn myself with love and give no forms to what we lost. Fairy tales speak of trust, connivance, flowers that give us sense. Free air, was it found, was it treasured? Did they fight for what's gone? Did they fight to save life and mine? If only they pictured the world we live in, would have surrendered to wave and pride will stand up to keep breathing. Get together and try to change the world and risk it all. Paid for us, forget all late and try to let it go. What have we done?
Hi, I'm Virginia. I'm 19 and I'm here today because I was given the precious opportunity to work with Family Economy Week event, which deals with very important common themes that are really close to my heart. The passion of music was born several years ago, and although I wrote so many songs so far, 2099 is the song that I feel most inside. What have we done? It's pretty tragic, but I wrote the text in a moment of despair. I wrote a common situation in the new generations who find themselves having to fight for a world that is in serious danger and now given up for dead. But I am positive. I'm sure that together we will change things, and we have great ideas, new ideas, and a lot of willpower from what I see from this event. So I'm sure that it will change. It will change for the better, and because after all, we've got too much to lose.
And thanks to Eugenia, an extraordinary piece. Try to let it go. Thanks to all that followed us today, and continue to discover the other conferences on the website www.familyeconomyweek.eu, and good continuation to all. Bye.
Wake up, cities, start and take control over your future. It's been days, weeks and years, it's time to make it real. Stand up with me. We have so many goals to believe in. We'll try everything to achieve it.